All right. G'day, Novocastrians. Welcome to this Jetstream AMA for this weekend. Was supposed to be in conjunction with Phoenix City Pod, but unfortunately we had some unforeseen dramas yesterday with Patrick's availability. So it's just me today and catching up with a very special guest. Jets cult hero, has to be said, striker Jeremy Brockie. Brox, how you going, mate? It's good to see you.
Yeah, not too bad. I'm on day 10 of hotel quarantine here in Sydney, so could be better. But 4 days until I catch up with my family, so I'm excited.
Yeah, it's good that it's just about over, but we'll definitely get to why you're in quarantine in a little bit. But just sort of tell us how things have been going with the whole COVID pandemic over in South Africa, because yes, most of the news over here is sort of local and European, and a little bit of how it's affecting Asia. We're not really hearing how the pandemic sort of affected the African continent. So how's the whole COVID thing been going over in South Africa?
Yeah, right now it's not too looking too flash. South Africa, believe it or not, the first case was actually just down the road from where I was living in South Africa. So yeah, the first case broke out start of March, I think, and the country reacted quite quickly compared to a lot of the other countries that grew in cases quite speedy. So they locked the country down pretty much straight away for 5 weeks to start with. So it was a complete lockdown. You're only allowed to leave the house to go grocery shopping and essential services, obviously, like the hospital types thing and that situation. So 5 weeks of that, then 4 weeks of what they called level 4, which wasn't really too much difference. A couple of restaurants were allowed to open for takeaway service. And I actually got on board and helped the local coffee shop with their delivery system.
Oh, mate, yeah.
That got me out of the house and a little bit of interaction, obviously, following the safety protocols and things like that. But to get out of the house and help a local coffee shop out was really good. And I did that for about 6-7 weeks, and there's not really any sign of the league restarting back there. Things were still moving very slow. We touched on before, my family, we decided to bring them back to Australia before the lockdown started. We didn't really know how South Africa was going to deal with the whole situation. And look, they got on board quickly, shut everything down. And the reason that they got on board and locked things down pretty quickly was to be able to prepare for what was to come in terms of high cases, get the medical facilities in the right condition, find extra beds, quarantine, those types of things. And so from that point of view, they were on the right track. But now the last couple of days, they've had above 6,000-7,000 consecutively for the last 4 or 5 days now. So not at the peak yet. So I probably left the country at the right time to.
Had the South African season finished, or was it partway through and they just don't know when it's going to come back?
No, there's still 6-7 games left. Obviously, the league went on hold in March when the lockdown began, and everything's moving really slowly. So the government said on the 1st of June, if you follow the right protocols, you can go back to training. And so they gave a proposal to the government. We thought that the proposal had been given to the government, and a month later, training still hasn't started. So my contract was coming to an end at the end of June. I was on loan. My club didn't extend my contract at my parent club, and so I approached my loan club and sort of said, "Do I continue to get paid beyond the expiry of my contract, or what's the situation?" And they couldn't really give me a straight answer. They were waiting on again league announcements and stuff like that. And I said, "Look, I've been away from my family for 3.5 months. You can't give me a guaranteed answer. I'm going to jump on a plane and get out of here." And there was a repat flight to Sydney, which is where I find myself now.
Okay, good. We'll get into other plans in a little bit. But how did you, just before we get on to going all the way back to where it all started, how had you found the communication? You sort of obviously mentioned a little bit of the communication there with your club not sort of being able to give you a straight answer, but has there been, because over here it's been a little bit frustrating. It was a little bit frustrating. It's obviously sorted now, but there was a little bit of frustration with everything being up in the air. There wasn't a great deal of communication. I think there was a lot of negotiations going on behind closed doors that obviously, people hate a vacuum and they just want to know what's happening. But was it a similar situation over in South Africa when it came to information coming from the league and players' unions and the government with what's actually the way forward for football in South Africa?
Yeah, that was really frustrating. Again, we were getting no messages. We're reading on social media and in the media that there was meetings going on between the owners and the big bosses of the league, and every time there was a meeting where, like, us as players were waiting for some sort of feedback or some sort of announcement from what came from those meetings, but nothing ever came, and we're just like, what's sort of going on? Like, we're quite an important part of the league, obviously, and the situation, but we're getting no information. And then that leads to us, like, piping up in the club WhatsApp groups and trying to get some information there. So when you're relying on social media for information, it's never ideal.
Is there a players' union over in South Africa like here?
Not like here. No, it's sort of still trying to get off the ground there. So no, we couldn't rely on them for any information either. And it was very frustrating. And look, the first 5 weeks of the lockdown, we knew what was ahead of us.
Yep.
The fitness trainer and that would send workouts into our WhatsApp group, and we'd do them. But as the time slowly sort of moved on, you're like, how much longer are we going to be doing this for? I can only run laps of my garden for so long and do press-ups or squats in the backyard without any information. And that's probably another decision that led me to having enough, really, of the current season.
Yeah,
and jumping on plane.
And I mean, it's got to be frustrating. You're training for something you don't know if or when it's going to come back. You don't know whether they're just going to end the league where it finished, and then wait until the normal off season for a new season to start. Do you keep yourself at peak fitness? It had to be frustrating, and it's something that everybody around the planet's been dealing with in various levels of success, some better than others, but it sounds a bit of a frustrating situation. So what we'll do, Jeremy, we'll go right back to the beginning. Whereabouts did you grow up? Obviously we know in New Zealand, but whereabouts in particular, and where did you start playing your football, and were you sort of mainly football, or were obviously New Zealand being a big mad union country, did you sort of start with that and then maybe move into football, or football was the only sort of sport you really liked?
Yeah, I was born in Christchurch, in the South Island, and brought up in Nelson, which is the top of the South Island. And growing up through school, most of my mates in school and that were all rugby. So I'd spend most of my school lunchtimes before school kicking an oddly shaped ball around and running around and trying to tackle my mates and chase after them. And then would spend my after school hours with my football mates and kicking a ball around. I think my love for football came, my dad used to play, not at a high level or anything like that, but I would always spend plenty of time in the changing room, in the club rooms on the weekend after he had been playing football. And I had a couple of mates in a similar age group that we were just sort of following and enjoying that scene. And it was, I think, so my love was always for football. There was a stint when I was maybe about 12 or 13 where I wanted to try and give rugby a go. So I joined the school rugby team, played one tournament, scored one try, couldn't tackle the big boys running at me, so I thought, no, this is not me. I quickly moved back to football.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. And did you what about your interest in football in general? Did you have a team that you followed when you were younger, and who were your football idols? How did that how did your interest in football grow, sort of as you started playing it and then became more interested in it?
Yeah, look, the team that I followed is definitely not the one on the shirt you're wearing now. But I will say congratulations. It's been a while for you. So
it's been a good week. It's been a good week for Australia, New Zealand, and Liverpool. I must say, it's been a good week.
No, absolutely. So now I'm a big Manchester United fan. I think growing up in New Zealand, most of the football that was sort of played on TV was obviously the English stuff, and then they only really played. They would only show the bigger clubs on TV, and Manchester United took my interest. And one of my idols growing up was David Beckham, massive David Beckham fan. And I think my love for Manchester United grew as I grew up watching him, and I was obviously pretty successful at that time as well.
Yeah, that doesn't hurt, does it?
No.
Have you managed to make a trip over to England to catch a couple of games? Have you been able to at the time?
No, I've never watched Man United play live. I've been to. I watched when we were on a schoolboys trip in about 2001, I think. Charlton versus Birmingham. That was probably the only tickets that we could get available, but to be able to experience that was pretty special. And I was actually in London a couple of years ago for a mate's wedding. It was in Manchester, and I was lucky enough to do the Old Trafford tour in the off season, which was a fantastic experience, and something I'll never forget. Got some really cool photos and stuff at the stadium, and fantastic.
Now, as you were growing up, did you always play a forward striker position, or did you try a couple of different positions? Were you always a main striker, or did you try a couple of different areas?
Yeah, no, I always enjoyed scoring goals from a very young age. But I think my very first football game, I was a goalkeeper. But I think that just came as that sort of like rotation. I think.
Yep.
My dad was the coach of the team, and I think my granddad used to tell me that I scored about 3 or 4 goals in the first half, and Dad said, no, you've had enough. You need to go back and spend a bit of time in the goal to let some other players score some goals. So, and apart from that, I think maybe when I was about 14 or so, we used to have like federations, so I'd go down to Christchurch for like sort of training camps, and they tried to make me into a centre back at one stage through one of the training camps, and no, that wasn't enjoyable for me. So I've always enjoyed scoring goals. Obviously, I've played as a wide player and as a wing back, and a couple of starts for the New Zealand national team at left fullback. But apart from that, my love is scoring goals.
So like I said, we'll let Patrick cover off most of the New Zealand stuff. So just to quickly mention that you made your senior debut for Nelson Suburbs in the Matson's Premier Football League before you moved to Canterbury to play in the New Zealand Football Championship. Then you moved to the Knights in the inaugural 05-06 A-League season. The only thing we'll sort of touch on with that period was that you got off the mark in the A-League by scoring a double against the Jets at North Harbour Stadium.
Yeah.
How far back do your memories of games go? Do you remember anything about that game, and how was it? How did you feel about getting off the mark in the new professional competition in Australia and New Zealand? And thanks very much for scoring a double against us.
No, well, I will say, I think we were 4-0 down at the time before I came on. So, I remember that game fondly. I think it was obviously my first year as a professional, and I didn't really play for the first half of the season. The coach had said before the season started that he wanted to give the older guys, the experienced guys, run of the roost first. We're obviously having a very bad season, and it came to that game, and he sort of called me on and said, "Look, go and enjoy yourself, boy. You've been training for a few months now. Can't really do any worse than how we've been playing all season. So go out there with that freedom." And ended up with a nice race and announced myself onto the scene.
Yeah, and absolutely, and it got you noticed, most definitely. Obviously, you after that the end of the season, it was announced you signed for Sydney FC on a 2-year deal. that's a pretty big leap, obviously going to one of two of the sort of major teams in the A League at the time. What was your what was that experience? How did that all come about? Were you talking to a couple of clubs, because obviously it looked like the Knights were going to go under it as the season sort of wound down? So were you fielding offers from a couple of different clubs, and what made you choose Sydney FC to be your destination?
Yeah, look, I think if I remember, there was 8 teams in the league back then, and after that season, I think I scored 4 goals in the end, and like I was had quite a few phone calls. I think I had offers from 5 of the 8 A-League teams, and you won't believe it, I was probably about a couple of days from signing for the Jets. I had some really good chats with. I think the coach was Richard Money back then, wasn't it?
He was, yeah. Richard was he was the first season. Second season was Nick Theodorakopoulos.
Yeah, okay then. So yeah, I must have been with Nick or I think it was Ante Milicic. He was the striker then, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I even maybe had a chat with him at some stage. I think they must have tried to get him to sweeten the deal, sort of that older experience. Look after the younger boy, and I was very close to signing with the Jets, and it wasn't until sort of like the last minute Sydney FC came rolling in, and well, if I look back now, it was definitely the wrong decision probably to make at that time. But when you're a young 18-year-old, the best team in the league sort of wants to sign you, and when they got players like Dwight York, and your eyes sort of like light up, and you think, oh, this is the best. This team's just won the league, and they got all the best players, and oh no, this is fantastic. Let me jump on this. And then I got into that environment. I arrived for pre-season injured. I had a broken foot, and the coach, I can't remember his name now, but
Terry Butcher.
No, the coach in the first season, what was his name?
Vidislav
Labarsky. Was it? Yeah, I think it was Pierre Labarsky.
It would have been Pierre Labarsky.
Yeah, so he was the one that I'd been speaking to, and so I obviously signed under him, and then just after I signed, he left, and then Terry Butcher took over, and obviously he had no clue who I was, and I just moving from Auckland to a big city like Sydney, and it was tough times.
Yeah.
Obviously I signed a 2-year deal there, and after the first season, we agreed to part ways, and we headed back to New Zealand.
Now, did you have? Obviously, you mentioned it was a bit of a struggle that season, but how did you find? I mean, even a club where it didn't work out, you didn't play all that often, still training and gaining experience from all the players that you previously mentioned at that club would have been beneficial for you. Who were the players that really stood out and sort of helped you out while you were there that you remember looking back?
Yeah, I sort of joined some of the younger players at that time. I think Ian Fife and Nikolai Topol-Stanley I moved and I was staying with a family in Bondi, which was lovely. But and Ian Fife and Topol-Stanley, they both lived in Bondi as well, so we'd sort of share a ride together, and they would pass on their experience, and they were helping me out a lot. And when I've had a really good back end of a season, and then to go to a big club, young, unexperienced, not really knowing what's ahead of you, and they really helped me to settle into the area, settle into the club, and help me through the tougher times as well. I think when I was playing every game towards the end of that season, and then you go from not playing to spots off the bench and not in the squad, it was quite a difficult situation to find myself in. Like I said, after I had been playing, so it was a difficult time, but learned a lot from that going forward in my career. That's for sure.
So how did you find Terry Butcher? Because obviously you mentioned in the at the Knights you didn't play all that much, being your first season, and then you played a fair bit towards the end of the season and had some success after you recovered from your injury, was there just nothing in the coach's thinking to give you a chance, or what was the?
Yeah,
Did he ever
yeah.
sit you down and say, "This is what you need to do"? Like how was he with managing, trying to
Yeah.
get back into the game and into the
When
squad?
I look back at all the coaches that I've had over my career, the best coaches are the ones that can not only produce a good training session or give a good team talk or help you when times are tough. The best coaches have been the one that can manage all the players, can manage, learn how to know about each individual and know when or identify when someone's struggling or going through a tough patch or just treating every individual. Every individual is different, and some need a rack up and like that physical loud voice. Some need the hand on the shoulder, and I just don't think Terry was that type of coach to be able to manage players properly, and I think that probably what was one of his downfalls in the end as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, you did mention that you left at the conclusion of that season. You were still named in the Sydney FC squad for the Asian Champions League for that year, though. Was there a temptation to give it a little bit more time and see if you could make one or two appearances in the Champions League games and then look around for other options, or you'd had enough by that stage?
Yeah.
It was time to get out.
Yeah. I think I'd probably had enough, and I think I was named in that squad, but I think at the end of that season also, I think the club was sort of, I was obviously occupying a foreign spot as well, and I think the club probably wanted to go in a different direction as much as I wanted to sort of renew the football love again. And look, at that time, I think that's when the Wellington Phoenix was starting to come back into the league, and Ricky Herbert was calling me a lot and wanting me to go back there, and so that was probably also influencing my factor until I did mutually terminate my contract at Sydney, and then Ricky I couldn't get a hold of Ricky after that for a couple of years.
Yeah, I was going to say, he was keen to get you there, and then all of a sudden you're available, and there was no Wellington Phoenix coming calling. That was a bit weird. So were you tossing up staying in Australia, or you wanted to, because you ended up going back? Looking at my notes here, you ended up going back and signing for Hawke's Bay back in the Football Championship before you moved to Team Wellington, which is Wellington's team in the local competition as well. Were you wanting to go back home and just sort of recharge the batteries and maybe look to reset things, or was there still a possibility of staying in Australia and moving to another club and trying your luck again?
Yeah, I think after the season that I'd had, not really playing that much, obviously never carried on to continue to score goals when I did play. There wasn't, not that I know of, there wasn't any interest from any Australian clubs at that time, and with the promise of a deal at the Wellington Phoenix to go home and play football again, that's where my sort of mind was set. And and then obviously the Phoenix thing didn't happen, and I moved to Hawke's Bay United under the coach Jonathan Gould, who I had spent a lot of time with my younger age group teams. He said, come on, let's try and get you back into football again, into the professional environment, and I felt he was probably the right person to try and help get me out of a bad sort of state that I sort of found myself in. And he tried hard, didn't quite work there either, and then the Olympic year came around in 2008, where it was pretty much make or break to whether I continue being a professional footballer or I join a list of names that just was a flash in the pan.
Well, obviously, after you were at Team Wellington in 2008, the possibility of an expansion club coming up, you ended up signing for North Queensland Fury. What was the reasonings behind that? Had you got some more contact from other clubs at the time, or you'd got the phone call from to go over there? Because that would have been another leap of faith, going to a completely new club in an area not really renowned for its sort of football representation.
Yeah, look, for me, it was an opportunity to get back into professional football. And leading up to me signing there at the Fury, I had a really good Olympic campaign. Scored a lot of goals leading up to the Olympics, including a brace against Australia in Sydney, where I think Ian Ferguson, I think he had already been named the Fury coach, maybe, or he was a part of the Australian under-23 setup. There was some sort of connection there, and I got the phone call after the Olympics to go up there and join them. And like I said, for me, it was an opportunity to get back into professional football. Not many players get an opportunity to have a second chance, and I thought I've got to take this opportunity to try and live the dream that I always set for myself when I was a young kid.
Yeah, well, and how did you find the club, its setup and professionalism and the other players? Obviously, you'd played at Knights and you'd played at Sydney FC, so you'd had sort of opposite ends of the spectrum. Whereabouts did the Fury? Because it was always a club I wanted. They only lasted 2 seasons, but it was always an away trip I wanted to make, and I thought I was going to be able to get up there, but they ended up going out of getting folded before that happened. But yeah, how was your time up in Townsville, and what are your memories?
Yeah, I absolutely loved it. I think it was different to my experiences at the Knights in Sydney. I think because it was sort of like being a professional for the first time again, because I'd been out of the professional environment for a year and a half, 2 years, to be able to have that opportunity again. I went in there and as a bright-eyed kid, like it was my first deal again. And obviously, being a new club in a league that had started to slowly establish themselves, it was always going to be difficult on the playing field. And teams that have come in since that day have always, it normally takes them a couple of years to sort of adjust and get their final playing squad and things like that. But from a training point of view, they had really good training facilities. Obviously, having to train very early in the morning because
Yeah.
yeah. And it was a good little environment to be in. I think obviously the North Queensland Cowboys are the team that's spoken about there, and I think that's probably why the club struggled a little bit in terms of trying to get a good fan base and stuff like that. Don't get me wrong, we had a nice little supporters base, but it was never going to be able to compete with the Cowboys. And I had a fantastic, enjoyable 12 months there. Footballing wise, again, injuries unfortunately struck me down in the second half of the season.
Yep.
But I managed to meet my now wife, who comes from Townsville, and be joining them in a few days' time. So something good came out of it, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. There's positives to every story. So at the end of that first season up there, you ended up signing for the Jets. So were you looking to leave at the end of that season already, or did an offer come from Newcastle that you decided you wanted to leave Townsville? What was the process behind that?
Yeah, I think again, so in that season at the Fury, I broke my leg in January, towards the back end of the season, obviously. That was 2010. The World Cup was around the corner with New Zealand, and it was touch and go whether I was going to make that final squad because of the injury. And I thought I wanted to stay at the Fury because I enjoyed my time there, and obviously I had Jess, my wife there. But I think again they weren't really giving me an answer. They were saying, "Oh, we want to just see how you come back from the injury. We're in no rush," sort of thing. And I thought, "Oh God, here we go. I'm injured. I'm a foreign player. It's going to be difficult to try and get a new contract." And then I randomly got a phone call out of the blue saying that the Newcastle Jets were interested. Am I interested? I said, "Yep, I'm not going to turn them down a second time." They offered me a 2-year deal, and me and my wife, well, not wife at the time, obviously, but we were on our way to Newcastle. We'd only been together for for a couple of months. So everything moved very quickly, and then we were living in an apartment in Charlestown.
Wow, a big leap of faith from her. She was, yeah.
Yeah,
She
I
definitely.
know. It was sort of like that. It was sort of like that. Do you want to? I can't stay here anymore.
Yeah.
We've got something special that we've built over these first couple of months of our relationship. Do you want to come or not? And she said, no, let's go for it. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hey, Newey is always going to be the draw card, mate. So
exactly.
So, and look, that was so you signed for the Jets on a 2-year deal from the 2010-11 season. So what made Newcastle? Was it purely because the contract was on the table? Had you visited Newcastle before? What were your thoughts around the club?
So whenever you play in Newcastle, they put you up in the Crown Plaza down there on the waterfront, and you always go for your team walks along the water there. And it's a nice stadium, and lots of little like bits and pieces. You've obviously got the beach life and stuff like that. So I'd enjoyed playing there over the years, and we didn't hesitate. Obviously, the contract probably contributed to me wanting to move there. But I had no hesitations, and like I said, because I'd already missed out or decided elsewhere earlier in my career to get another chance to come to Newcastle. Obviously, I'd seen the place there before I was close to signing after my first season, and I was happy to get on board and move forward with the club.
Well, it wasn't long after you joined that the Jets had fallen into struggles. I think 3 weeks into that season was when the FFA took the license off Con and handed it over to Nathan. Well, obviously you signed a bit before that. So were you ever having issues with getting paid, and could you see any of those issues bearing fruit? It's got to be frustrating. You'd played at New Zealand Knights, which it followed after a season. Fury were having struggles from the get-go. I think they had one of their major investors walk away almost straight away, and the bloke who was running it was struggling to fund it. And then you come to Newcastle hoping to put all that behind you, and Con's in all sorts of trouble, and the licenses are changing hands. So you had a bit of a bad run for a bit there.
Maybe I was the curse. No, we've never had any payment. I never had any payment problems or anything like that. I think there might have been superannuation issues.
That's what the problem was, yeah.
But that ended up getting sorted out through time, and so no, under Con, I never had any major issues or experiences. But then when Nathan took over, obviously. The whole city sort of was like, wow, this is brilliant, and to be a part of that, like it looked like the future of the club was going to be amazing. I thought, wow, this is what we're in for here. It's going to be good.
Yeah, well, there was a big upswing in confidence and support and attendances. It was there was a big air of positivity around the Jets at the time. How was everything behind the scenes with the players? Were you starting to see differences from when you first rocked up under Con, and little changes and stuff that were coming in through Hunter Sports Group that Nathan owned? Little improvements and what sort of stuff was going on behind the scenes to turn the club a lot more of a professional outfit, as it were?
Yeah, so obviously, like you already touched on, the memberships and those types of things started to grow. And as a player, you always want to play in front of big crowds. And the Newcastle faithful always turned up in big numbers there, and it's always enjoyable to play in front of big numbers. And then from outside of that point of view, they obviously were taking good care of the training facilities. They spent a lot of money putting a gym together there at the training ground as well, so I wasn't bouncing between different locations. They were doing extra little things, providing meals, and they'll get yoga teachers in and Pilates teachers, and so all that like just felt like a lot more professional environments. And as a football player, when you start getting perks like that, just makes you want to work a little bit harder and make a little bit more of the opportunity given to you.
Were they still using wheelie bins for ice baths at the time, or did they bring in some proper ones?
No, I think even now they still use wheelie bins at some clubs.
They do. Yeah, you are right. So having a look at the big guys around the club at the time. So obviously Nathan and Ken Edwards were the two main people sort of running the Jets, and this was before obviously the Knights takeover had happened with Nathan, which we'll get to in a minute. But were you seeing much of Nathan and Ken Edwards around the place? Were they very front foot and very out in the with you guys as well as being in the public, the public face, as it were? Were you getting contact with them?
We saw Ken Edwards a lot more than we saw Nathan. I think I only recall maybe meeting Nathan one or two times. I think obviously a lot more other business to attend to as well. But yeah, no, Ken Edwards was always popping in and around the training facility, and I had quite a good relationship with him. And it's nice to when you're at a football club, it's always nice to see some of the bigger heads of the club pop themselves in and say hello. Just makes you as a player know that they're there and thinking, and you're in their mindset sort of thing. So again, to start off with, he was around quite a lot, but as the time grew on, not very much.
Yeah,
not that much.
We'll get to that in a minute. So obviously that first season you were under Branko Kalina. How did you find him to work for as compared to your previous coaches? Like obviously you had your issues with Terry and Franz up in North Queensland. How did you find working under Branko in that first season?
Yeah, no, he was good. I think he took over Sydney FC to run that Champions League. So we had a little small crossover before I ended up passing ways with Sydney. And so we'd met each other before. Obviously, I was very thankful to be given a deal from Newcastle. So I enjoyed working under him. His experience, been around for a long time, had a good track record. So I thought, no, this is probably the right coach to help me develop over the next couple of years, and I enjoy working under him.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, the end of that season we'll get to in a minute, and it changed into Gary Van Egmond. But the other big thing that took place that season was the Glamour Friendly with LA Galaxy and David Beckham. What was the whole experience around that game like? Was it being rumoured around the club before it actually got confirmed? And what are your memories of that whole experience?
Yeah, look, I have mixed memories of that experience because I was injured for that game as well. But then, yeah, no, there were rumours floating around, and when you hear those rumours, you're like, "Oh, is it true? Is it not?" And then obviously we touched on earlier, my idol was David Beckham, so I was like, "Oh, this is going to be fantastic! An opportunity to come close to an idol." And then obviously I think I had a broken foot maybe at the time, next to Ruben Zekovic in training, but you never want to get on the end of one of Ruben's nails.
No.
Nicest guy off the pitch though. Eh?
Yeah.
No, to be able to bring them to the club to play against them, and like you mentioned, a glamour friendly. It was just another notch that's we're thought with the new takeover is heading in the right direction. And I did get a photo with Beckham, so it was nice.
You did end up getting the photo?
Yes.
Yeah, good stuff. It had to have been a bit of obviously you said you're injured, so it might not have been much of an issue for yourself, but it had to have been, I suppose, a little bit frustrating for Branko and the coaching guys. The friendly in the middle of the season, I think we ended up playing 3 games in the space of a couple of a week and a bit. So how did you remember what was happening? How did the injured players versus the fit players, how was all that being sort of handled while you were at the club? Were you sort of rehabbing separately, or were they trying to make all the players in it together, and you sort of rehabbing it around the team, so you're not sort of feeling separated? How was it working at the time?
Yeah, no, they kept all the boys together. I think because I was injured, I sort of got a little bit more access. I ended up doing like a lot more of the community stuff, like the little coaching clinics and stuff that they put on. So I got roped into to doing a bit more of that and interacting from that side of the friendly, which was quite nice, considering I wasn't going to be playing. And it was a hectic time with a heavy schedule, but I think I don't know, you sort of get that renewed amount of energy as a player when you're going to be coming up in a big friendly like that. You know, the stadium's going to be packed, even though it's in the middle of a tight schedule. It's not really doesn't really come into your mind.
Now, obviously, the Jets finished outside of the finals. I think they were outside the finals by about 6 points. But there were a lot of season-ending injuries occurring at the time. I think there was about 3 or 4 players that had got some injuries towards the end of the season, and were missing quite a few players, which sort of cruelled the chances of getting into the finals. Do you remember any issues with training or fitness, or what do you think was sort of maybe the reasoning behind that around that time? There just seemed to be a lot of those sorts of injuries occurring that were coming back to bite us at the tail end of the season.
Yeah, no, I can't. Thinking back now, I can't. It was never a case of being overtrained or anything like that. We had a really good medical team then. We had Rob Dingle as the physio. Adam Waterson was the strength and conditioning trainer, which he's doing amazing for himself now.
Yeah.
Over in the MLS with the Galaxy. But no, we never had any issues like that. But I think sometimes in football, or not only in football, I was watching the Roosters play against, who are they playing? St. George on TV the other night, and they did two ACLs in the space of about 14 minutes. And I think sometimes that's just what happens in sport. And then as a player, when you see a couple of key players start getting injured, then the morale drops a little bit. Sometimes it's an opportunity for other players, but sometimes also it just one thing just leads into another, and that's what happens.
Yeah. Well, Nathan wasn't sitting still. They announced before the end of the season that Jason Kalina was signing on a marquee deal, the biggest deal that our club had ever offered anybody at the time. And he was still injured at the time, but was anticipated to be ready to go by the time the season started. So what was the feelings around the club at the time with news like Jason coming out, and you'd had the friendly with LA Galaxy, and there was new players coming in. Obviously, Heskey joined around that time as well. So there was a lot of positivity around the Jets. So were everybody fairly positive about the following season that you'd be able to have a good go of it, and finally Newcastle will be back up and challenging for finals and titles?
Yeah, for sure. And again, it was still that buzz that Tinkler was doing everything for the community, everything for the club. Now you're just gonna go on and sign one of Australia's best ever players, best ever midfielders, which was going to add value to any team, whatever team you went to, and then. There was a lot of excitement, a lot of buzz. The disappointment of not making the top 6 the year before. We thought, this could be a nice missing piece to the puzzle to help us get the club back to winning ways and to get where it should be going forward with a big owner and a lot of money's being pumped into the club. We're like, wow, this is brilliant, exciting. Can't wait for next season.
And then as typical as a Jet supporter, you the news, the other foot drops. Was there anything behind the scenes going on with regards to Jason's injury and the club not? Because there were newspaper reports starting to come out during that off season in the lead up to the season starting that the injury was worse than first thought, and it was going to take a lot longer, and because it was a pre-existing injury, it wasn't going to be covered by medical insurance, and all those sorts of things were starting to boil and bubble along under the surface before it blew up at the season launch, where Branko was obviously unceremoniously told to jump on his bike. Was there any sort of hint of that going on amongst the playing group? Was there talk of something not being quite right?
Yeah,
There had to have been tension from Branko's side of things, because he was getting all these questions from media, and probably questions from Troy Palmer and Nathan Tinkler as well about what's going on. So was there any sort of signs this might happen before it actually happened?
Obviously, the closer it got to the time, we thought that it was going to happen. But like, if I think back now, the time when Jason was there, that guy was so professional. Like, he would always be the first person to train, even though he's still in a knee brace, or he would be the first person to training. He would be training all through our training session. Everyone would leave, and he'd still be doing rehab. He was like working so hard. I think he probably felt his career for himself, obviously. But he worked so hard. He was trying his best to get onto the pitch. The guy was an absolute machine. Like the way he like looked after his body, just a real professional. But we as players also, we could tell that it just didn't really, like, no matter how hard we could see him working in the gym, we never really saw him on the pitch.
Yeah,
and it was just like, wow, this is not looking good. And then you add all the stuff that you're reading in the papers about the insurance, and it's worse than what's probably thought. Obviously, we didn't know the medical details or anything like that, but you can sort of start to put two and two together and think, oh no, this is not looking good. And then the rumors start circling about Branko, and okay, I think this is about this relationship's sort of about to end, and then it did, unfortunately for everyone, because if we had a fit Jason Kalina, then it could have been a completely different story.
So frustrating we never got to see him on the pitch in a Jet shirt, because it would have been absolutely fantastic, and another one of those what could have beens that you just sit there and think about what could happen. So obviously that all took place. How did you guys find out? Did you find out the same as everybody else, or was there did you get a call from the club to say this is taking place? Don't say anything to the papers.
No, you normally get that call or phone call or a message saying, there's an urgent meeting at the training ground. Everyone needs to be there. And as soon as you get that message, you know that normally the coach is gone. So no, that's how we found out. And then you're right. Don't say anything to the media until there's a press release, and then also you're not allowed to comment on anything if the media tries to call you. So
how soon after the phone call from the club did you also get a phone call from Jimmy Gardner from the Herald chasing information? What sort of time lapse?
He probably called as the text message come in, and he probably knew something as well.
He's an absolute hound, Jimmy Gardner. We had him a couple of weeks ago. No, he's a good bloke, and
he is a fantastic guy.
Fantastic. All right, so Gary Van Egmond returned for his second stint at the club a couple of weeks into the season. How did you find working for Gary, and how did it compare with working with Branko the season before? What were the strengths of both coaches, and who do you what coach do you think worked the best with you and helped you the most throughout your career? It doesn't have to be at the Jets, but what coach do you sort of highlight as one that really helped you?
Probably the best coach I've had throughout my career is a guy that I had at Supersport over in South Africa. His name's Stuart Baxter. He's had a fantastic coaching career, and I think what sets him apart from everyone else, what I touched on a little bit earlier, is his man management. The way that he deals with every individual, and he always said it's more important to make the players that are not playing regularly feel like they're still part of the team. I think when you're in the starting 11 regularly, you know that you're a vital member of the team. You're expecting to play every week, and if you're playing well, you will continue to play every week. But if you can keep the players, the wider squad players happy, on the same page and make them aware that they will get an opportunity at some stage to play in the squad, to contribute to trophies or winning football games. And that's pretty much your job done. And then we had fun training sessions, worked hard, and then he was always available, not as a football coach, but as like a father figure off the pitch if you had any other issues outside of football. So he's definitely been my biggest, my best coach and influence that I've had on my career. And I think what was different between Gary and Branko, my first season at the Jets, obviously, we touched on it earlier, I had the broken foot. I think I also maybe tore my quad as well in that first season. So Branko didn't really get the best out of me because I couldn't give my best because of injuries. So if I compare the two seasons, obviously the stats also speak for themselves. My second best season was much better than my first. I think Gary, obviously knowing the club, he's quite vocal from the start. He's trying to stamp his authority, and he's a lot more louder and outspoken than what Branko was. I think Branko, you can probably speak to him a lot easier than what you could with Gary. But then again, I had a fantastic second season with Gary. So
yeah.
Two completely different coaches, but Gary got the best out of him.
Yeah, absolutely. We spoke to Gary probably about a month ago now on this same deal, and yeah, he was very honest and forthright about how he was still learning about what he needed to do as a coach, and he didn't treat some players the right way and deal with them the right way. So it was very refreshing chat with Gary. He definitely recognised his shortcomings from both of his stints at the Jets. So the second season, obviously, there was such positivity in that off season, and then the whole Branko, the Kalina thing blew up. And was the playing group still confident you'd be able to have a good season, or had that absolutely massive upheaval right at the start sort of really put everything on the back foot, and you were struggling to catch up from that because you were obviously Branko and Gary's styles were different. Getting used to that takes time. He didn't have a preseason. They weren't his own players. So how was the playing groups feeling about that second season that you were there? Were you still thinking that you were going to be able to challenge for finals, or was there always a feeling that you were on the back foot from the get-go because of what happened?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of both. We always thought that we had a good enough squad to get into the top six, and I think I'm trying to put myself in a coach's position right now, and I think it's probably easier for a coach to take over maybe halfway through a season or towards the end of a season than right at the very start of a season when you haven't had a preseason to set your style of play and stuff in motion. So the first couple of months while the season going and trying to get a style of play across is not really ideal from a coach point of view and from a player's point of view, but that's the situation that we were put in. And obviously with all the stuff that had happened, it was you can't hide from it, but also as a professional player, you've got to try and put it to the side as quickly as possible. But then at the same time, all players react different to different situations and some take longer to get over situations like that. Some can just switch off and go straight into the new mode. And Gary was a completely different style of play to what Branko. So I think it did take us a little bit of time to adjust to that, and that probably was one of the reasons why we didn't end up finishing in the top six that season as well.
Yeah, well, you still had a fairly successful season from a personal level. Obviously, the previous season, as you mentioned, had been hampered by injuries. But do you feel that the style of play that Gary was trying to do and all that was more of a benefit to your style of play and how you get the best out of yourself? Was that a better fit for you, or do you think that if you hadn't have had those injuries the previous season, that Branko's way of playing was better for you?
It's a tough one to answer now because I wish I had have been able to play in that first season more to see. But I think the enjoyment of not having injuries in the second season also contributed to me being on the field, enjoying it and playing with that freedom and doing what I like to do, which was score goals. And so I think that mixed with what Gary was trying to implement probably was one of the reasons why I managed to have a good season and score goals quite consistently.
Yeah.
But then it's not nice when you're scoring goals and then you don't make it into that final period. Well, same sort of feeling I had with the Phoenix.
The fans certainly saw your efforts and you developed a real rapport with the support. Is that something that you felt a relationship coming from the fans to you, and you felt like that you were appreciated, and that sort of helped you, go even better? How does the positive relationship with the support sort of benefit players? And conversely, obviously, you might not have experienced it, but there's been certain players throughout Jets history that have got pelters from the crowd at various stages. So that's got to be a bit detrimental and very difficult to recover from.
Yeah, look, I absolutely had a fantastic relationship with the Jets fans, and I knew that they were always going to have my back, whether I was maybe having a bit of a down first half. I knew they'd still be supporting me there in the second half. And, I would always spend time after the games signing stuff for kids and supporters, and I still have some fantastic relationships now with people in Newcastle, and we just really loved the area. And for me as a player, you can never not give enough time back to the fans. They work hard during the week. They spend their money at the games, not only on a ticket, but then they're traveling to games. They're buying food at the stadium. They're buying merchandise. For me, you can never not sign one autograph too less or too many. As long as the kids keep lining up there at the tunnel after a game, I'll keep signing signatures or giving boots away or whatever it is. Just trying to give my little bit of appreciation and thank you back to the fans that have supported me. Because let's be honest, because I was injured most of the first season, the fans could have been like, oh, we're not really getting our money's worth here, or why do we need to support this guy when he hasn't ever really played in the first season? But to get the support that I have throughout the whole time and the relationships that I built on and off the pitch there at Newcastle, fantastic memories and something that I've always looked back on throughout my career. And you talk about the opposite end of on the opposite end, I've experienced that as well. Experienced that over here in South Africa at one of my previous clubs. It's not a nice situation to be in, and but again, we touched on it before. The fans spend their money and expect something in return.
So, what are some of your standout memories from your time in Newcastle? Do you have any favourite games? What do you think was your best ever game in a Jet shirt?
I have some fantastic memories of some of the goals I scored. I can remember Topol Stanley dribbling down the left from left back, the big heel wobbling around, and he put a picture of the delivery onto my head. I didn't score too many headers back then, and I rose nicely to put that one in. And then obviously I scored a nice volley against Sydney FC as well. But I think the game I probably enjoyed the most was against Perth Glory. I scored a double that day. One of the goals is still quite memorable to this day. And I think we ended up winning the game maybe 3-2 or 3-1 or something, maybe even 3-0. I can't remember.
Yeah.
Was it?
We don't usually get too many good
No.
results.
So,
they tend to.
yeah, those types of memories, and then again, I've already touched on the relationships that I built in Newcastle. Me and my wife, probably the most enjoyable 2 years we've had throughout my playing career. We always said we wanted to go back to Newcastle and live in Newcastle when I finished playing. Those up until probably about 3 months ago when the coronavirus hit, and Jess and the kids returned back to Townsville for the time being, but now the kids have started school there, and so Townsville might take us for a little bit, but I still have good mates in Newcastle. Obviously, I keep in touch with Taylor Egan a lot. Obviously, Michael Bridges is still there. Leo Bertos is living in Newcastle. I have Glenn Moss is obviously been there as well. So I have a good, not only football relationships there, but I have relationships from sponsors when I was there. My matchday sponsor, Brett, who owned the car company, we still keep in touch. Another one of my matchday sponsors, Cole, who owned Tasty Bites Cafe, we still keep in touch. So a lot of good memories from Newcastle, and maybe I can still convince my wife to move back there one day.
What were some of your favourite things to do outside of football in Newcastle? Did you have any favourite cafes, tourist spots, restaurants? What sort of things did you like to do during your non-football time?
Yeah, my wife was. We didn't have any kids back then either, so she obviously was working full time. So after training, I'd just like to hang out with the boys. We go to the beach, and then there's a few nice restaurants, a few nightclubs that we'd always go and have a couple of drinks in after a game. And those memories will never leave me. We had a fantastic apartment in Charlestown, which was a lovely area to live. And who knows? I could still convince the wife to move back.
Was there still the regular spot in Fanny's back at that point? I don't know whether they closed or not.
Yeah, the Fanny's was still there. Is that still open now?
No, it's changed now. It's closed down for a few years and reopened as Argyle House. But yeah, it's still known colloquially as Fanny's. Yeah, I don't know.
I'm not sure I could go there now anyway. 3 kids and a wife, so.
I think they might finally replace the carpet. So there is a bond, I suppose, to it start shutting down for a little while. Going back to your time at the club, what sort of players, you sort of mentioned Taylor Regan and Glenn Moss, what sort of players at the club at the time? Did you have any other players like the overseas players that came in, help you out with mentoring and all that sort of thing? Or were you sort of a bit more mentoring some of the younger players yourself? What was your memories of that sort of time with respect to the playing side?
Yeah, I think we had a couple of big influences in the change room. Obviously, Michael Bridges was one of them. I think he made everyone feel welcome that walked into that change room. And not only that, but his wife was very welcoming and would always help the new partners and girlfriends settle into the area. If anything was needed, then they were always the couple to sort of go to be helped out. Casey Wehrman, obviously another big influence in the change room. A lot of experience, and would always die on the pitch for any club he played for or any team, and would always have his players' backs. And I think those two stood out a lot. And then I had mates that I'd played with previously. Obviously, Topless Stanley, we just touched on. Ruben Zankovic was at Sydney FC when I was there. So those types of guys are top guys. Still keep in touch with them now. And but yeah, I got a special bond with Taylor Egan, and we still keep in touch to this day. And it's fantastic to see him doing well over there in Malaysia too.
Yeah, fantastic. Yes, he's and hopefully we'll in the next couple of seasons we might finally see him back in Newcastle. He's been away for long enough.
He has.
So obviously it was announced at the end of the end of the 11-12 season that you'd finally signed a deal with Wellington on a 3-year deal for the 12-13 season. So what was sort of behind your decision to leave Newcastle? I'm pretty sure this was around the time, the first time that Nathan threatened to hand back the license, and things were starting to sort of fray around the edges with regards to Hunter Sports Group and ownership of the Jets. So was that sort of getting into your thinking, or was it more a fact that the Wellington offer had finally come around and you really wanted to move back home to New Zealand and try your hand playing for the New Zealand team?
I didn't want to leave Newcastle. I wanted to stay. I enjoyed my 2 years there, and I had a good season there. The second season, obviously, I wanted to extend my contract there, and I'm not sure. Even though the season they had, I'm not sure Gary was set on really keeping me. I think he might have had other strikers lined up. Obviously, I was occupying a foreign spot, which also might have come into the thinking. I remember we were trying to sort my citizenship stuff at the time to make it happen and extend my stay there. I think I was on minimum wage there at the time, which was fine because I was off contract at the time, and I wanted to move to Newcastle, which wasn't an issue. And I don't think that I was asking for silly amounts of money. Well, I wasn't compared to what Wellington did end up offering me. I just thought that I was asking for what I felt I was worth, and they sort of just said that's not what we can do. And trust me, it wasn't massive amounts of money that I was asking.
It's a familiar story, most definitely.
Yeah, I wasn't holding the club to a ransom or anything like that. And then so it was probably maybe, I don't know, a month out from the season that we had decided that it wasn't really going to work. And then I had an offer from China. The transfer window was close to closing. There was a transfer fee going to be involved, but the Jets were saying, even though we'd already decided that I wasn't going to be extending, the Jets said, no, we're not going to let you leave because we've still got a chance of making the finals. I could sort of understand that, but then at the same time, they weren't willing to keep me at the club, so I was a little bit annoyed by that.
It's a silly decision. You're letting a player go in a couple of months, but you got a chance to make a transfer fee, and you'd already decided he's not coming back. So So I'm not really. I really don't know what happened to that day, because Gary was sort of saying, no, it's a good opportunity, you can go, but the club is saying no. And I was meeting with the club, and they were saying no, it should be going to work. It's probably going to work. And I was like, someone's lying to me here. But I'm a professional, and I always have been. So I just put my head down and carried on and tried to make the top six. I think we needed to win every single of our last 4 games to have a chance. But I carried on trying, and then the season ended. The Phoenix got in touch, and then I went over there for 3 years. Yeah, no, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, we ended up finishing 7th. I think we were 2 points outside. So it was unfortunate, and it was definitely something I remember at the time. A lot of the supporters weren't happy with you being let go when you were going, but we could definitely understand making the switch to go back over to New Zealand. So that sort of just adds fuel to the fire about what was going on around the time, because the higher ups that were in charge of the Jets and the Knights were not football people, and they were just not making football decisions. So that most definitely stands up to looking back at what was going on at the time. So again, we'll leave the chat about playing for the Phoenix to when you have your chat with Patrick, but during your time in Wellington in 2013, you were loaned out to Toronto in the MLS. How did that come about, and what was behind the reason for going out on loan?
Yeah, I think obviously I had a really good season there at the Phoenix. Scored 16 goals in that first season, and as we all know, the A-League season's very, very long off season, and And as a footballer, all you want to do is continue to play. And Ryan Nelson, obviously a Kiwi legend, was head coach of Toronto FC at that time. He asked if I was keen to head over. Initially, it was only going to be for about maybe 2.5 months. We managed to extend it for about 4. And we went over there, and I really enjoyed it there. Like, really professional club. They just finished like a $20 million training facility, state of the art. We were there in summer, so we didn't even have to bear the snow and the cold. Really enjoyed my 4 months there. They wanted to keep me. I wanted to stay, but I still had 2 years on my Phoenix contract, and obviously it's a little bit messy there with salary caps and transfer fees and all that sort of stuff. So it never really eventuated into anything more than the 4 months, unfortunately.
Are you surprised that it's an avenue that more A-League players haven't taken up over because obviously it's such a long off season. It's like, it would be a good way to spend a couple of months to keep fit and gain some experience in another league in a similar environment. But are you surprised that it's not something that more people have not tried, or do you think from your own experience it's probably too difficult to make work properly?
Yeah, I think it probably is quite difficult to make it work properly. I think I went like sort of halfway through their season and then not finishing the season as well. So I don't think it's really that attractive for maybe an MLS team to take a player that could do really well, but you're going to lose them before the finals, sort of thing. So, but no, it's a nice league. It's well run, good setup, a lot of traveling, obviously.
Yeah.
But the Americans, obviously, they always want the best of the best. So if one club goes and spends so much on a training facility, then the rest of the clubs have to go and do it, sort of thing. So good facilities and stuff like that. A little bit cheesy with fireworks and all that sort of stuff before the game, but it's all part of the occasion and part of American sport, which was a really enjoyable 4 months.
And how do you find the standard of play versus the A-League? Do you think they're on a fairly similar level, or
it was
MLS as available, they're probably able to get a bit better standard?
Yeah, no, it's pretty similar, right? I think the squads are a lot bigger there, and they have a lot of like the younger players and their younger Americans that come through the college system and stuff like that. So there can be quite a big difference between the best players and the players that are coming through. But no, I think the standards is quite similar, and but I think obviously what probably sets the two leagues apart when you look at it at the moment is the money that's pumped into the game and the big name players that they continue to attract in the MLS.
At the end of the 2014-15 season, you moved to SuperSport over in South Africa. Not really sort of known as a footballing destination, although it sort of really picked up after the World Cup there. What was sort of behind the decision to go over there? And had you had any other overseas offers apart from the China one that you mentioned throughout your career? And was there an overseas visit you'd like to have made that never eventuated, apart from obviously, like we said, the China one?
Yeah. So I left halfway through my third season at the Phoenix, and America had taken over. I didn't really fit into his plans anymore. Didn't fit his playing style type of situation, and I went to him at the start of that season. I got just a phone call out of the blue saying that a club in South Africa is interested in me. We played Bafana Bafana with the New Zealand national team maybe 6 or 7 months before that.
Yep.
The coach of the South African national team then got the SuperSport job, which I think that's how it sort of come about. And I'd sort of decided that I wanted a new challenge, a different change of scenery. So there was that option, and there was a club in Malaysia that were also interested in me. The club in Malaysia were only offering a 1-year deal. The South African one was 2.5. by the time I took it up. And I first approached Ernie and said, "Oh, look, there's an opportunity in South Africa that I want to pursue." And he's like, "Do you know that they carry guns over there? Does your wife know that?" And I was like, yeah, well, maybe. and he said, "Look," because that was at the start of the season. He said, "Look, I can't let you go now. Like, the window's about to close. Like, I'm not going to be able to like replace you. If the interest is still there, then maybe I can give me like in the middle of the season. We might better revisit it, and it'll give me a bit of time to bring someone else in." And I said, "Okay, no problem." And then over the coming months, the talks between the two clubs developed. The contract was sort of set in stone, and Ernie said, "Yeah, no problem. Let's get it sorted." And there was only a small transfer fee paid, and my final game with the Phoenix was a nice send off before I headed over to South Africa, and I never knew that it was 5.5 years later I'd still be playing there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and you spent a fair bit of time at SuperSport, 81 appearances and 28 goals. So sort of like we've talked about comparing clubs and professional levels and all that sort of thing. How does the South African League and SuperSport stack up compared to the clubs you've been at, including Toronto and Sydney and Newcastle? How's the league run over there, and how did you find it?
I'll just quickly correct you. I scored 54 goals in my time at SuperSport. I think there's a couple of games.
They've got it. They've got your wiki needs updating.
Yeah, no, I think there's the African League that they don't, the African Champions League that they mustn't have factored into that.
Yeah.
But no. I think a big difference between South African football and the previous, the A-League, the A-League, because that's where I spent a lot of my career as well, is the tactical understanding of the game. I think in Australia it's a lot more players understand and are happy to go with the tactical side of the game. But in South Africa, the players are very off the cuff. A lot of them are growing up and playing football in their backyards on the concrete and stuff like that. And so individually, I think players in South Africa technically have got unbelievable ability, but there's not many clubs that have managed to put a tactical influence into the clubs, and the clubs that have, they're the ones that are a little bit more successful than the others on a consistent basis. So yeah, I've played, some of the players I've played with technically have been unbelievable, but I think if A-League teams were to play South African teams, then A-League teams would probably outdo them tactically. But you might get a couple of South Africans that individually might better win you a game, if that sort of makes sense.
Yep, yeah, definitely. Matt Stoneman on the Jetstream Facebook page sort of asked how South Africa is treating you. I suppose we'd probably change that to a past tense. How did South Africa treat you while you were there? You obviously spent, like you said, you spent over 5 years there, so you must have been a pretty positive experience. How did you enjoy the lifestyle and everything around it in South Africa? What have you found to be the stuff you really enjoyed being in South Africa?
I think South Africa as a country, when you live outside of the country, it's portrayed as quite a dangerous and unsafe country. A lot of the media reports, and obviously that's what media is there to do, is spill those jobs. But once you get inside the environment, you understand where those unsafe areas are, which every country has those unsafe areas. I think maybe just in South Africa it's a little bit more extreme than what we're used to. But we lived in a lovely area there. We met a lot of lovely people. There's lots for the kids to do. Like the restaurants are made for kids, and so you'll go to a restaurant and there's like a massive playground, and you can go there for breakfast and you're still there at lunch because the kids have bumped into friends from school, or there'll be little like indoor football like pitches and cricket pitches, golf course, like mini golf, like all in these playgrounds. So it's catered for families. And then you've obviously got the other side of it where you have the safaris that you can go on and enjoy that sort of experience. And it probably helped that the football was going well too. I managed to win quite a few cup competitions, 2 league trophies with Mamelodi Sundowns, and score goals. So I think when the football's going well and the off the pitch stuff's going good, then that makes for a happy lifestyle. And it's been a good 5.5 years. There are opportunities and offers to go back, but I haven't decided if that's where I'll continue my journey yet or not.
Yeah, well, that pretty much segues into the next part. Like I said, we mentioned you're actually in Sydney in quarantine at the moment. So, what are your plans for yourself going forward? Is a Brocky return to the A-League on the cards? Jets legendary supporter Todd Blackwell, RawPrawn25 on Twitter, asked, when are you moving back to Newey? And we would love to see you playing in the Northern New South Wales NPL. So I suppose to answer all that and cover it off, what's your status at the moment, and what are your plans moving forward?
I did see Todd's message on there, and to be fair, he is a top guy.
Yeah, absolutely.
He is constantly checking up on me, congratulating me for goals, retweeting when my games are on in South Africa. I met him a couple of years ago when I came back after, I think I must have been in South Africa for a year or so, and came back for Taylor Regan's wedding. I met up with him, gave him one of my playing shirts. He's a fantastic supporter and a really, really top guy. I think I still have a little bit more professional games in me yet, though, Todd. Yeah. Do the Jets have foreign spots available?
That's a good question. They probably would after this season's finished, but yeah, that's most definitely something that a lot of Jet supporters would like to see. But yeah, so what are your plans for going? You're a free agent at the moment.
Yeah, no, I'm a free agent. In about 3 days' time, I'm going to be a free agent. Like I said, I do have offers and options to go back to South Africa. There's a little bit of interest in Asia, but the football market's a bit difficult at the moment. It's not really like so up and down, not really knowing what's going on. And yeah, a couple of A-League clubs have shown interest. So my family, my wife and kids are pretty set here back in Australia now. They've enjoyed living here for the last 3 months. So something a little bit closer to home might be ideal for the Brocky family.
Yeah, absolutely. So watch this space.
Yes.
Just before we get onto our last bit, just wanted to ask how Rickson and Gareth are doing.
Yeah, look, they're fantastic, eh? I'm not sure if too many know the backdrop behind the story, but I'll share a little bit of it.
Yeah. No, I had a bit of a summation there, but yeah, you can feel free to summarise.
Okay. No, so while we're in South Africa, my wife and one of her really good friends, Beck, had got chatting. Beck had cystic fibrosis, so she wasn't able to physically carry and grow a child, a baby within her. And my wife, the good, lovely person that she is, offered to be a surrogate mother, and so we were surrogate parents for Beck, Gareth, and their little boy Rickson, who is now gone 2 years old. And it's a fantastic story. Something that is probably one of the most rewarding things that we've done throughout our lives to date, really.
Yeah.
There was a sad moment during the whole pregnancy where Beck actually passed away from the disease, which was not a very nice situation for anyone. No. That knew Beck, but they got a lot of awareness, and Gareth, single dad now with his little 2-year-old boy, carrying a part of his loving wife wherever he goes, and they're very special, rewarding that we can do. And they live up in Townsville, so I'll be going for a beer with Gareth in a few days' time, that's for sure.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, it was definitely. I know a lot of us in Newcastle were absolutely tremendously proud of you guys when we heard that. We're really sad to hear when Beck passed away, but most definitely, please pass our thoughts and well wishes on to them when you see them. When you go and visit up in Townsville, it's great to hear they're doing well. We'll quickly finish off. We've been chatting for a while, so I've just got some questions we call them the Jetstream 10. So feel free to throw any of your previous Jets or even any of your other former players under the bus for this segment. The first one is the first question is the Jets have a initiation ritual now when new players come in. They have to get up in front of everybody and belt out a song. Have you partaken in any similar initiation rituals when you've joined in at a club? That wasn't at the Jets at the time when you joined, was it? I'm pretty sure it came in a couple of seasons after you.
Yeah, no, I don't think it was, but yeah, I have joined a couple of clubs where the initiation is to get up and sing, and yeah, I normally just revert to the haka. It normally gets people
really?
going.
Yeah.
Normally gets people going everywhere. The haka is associated with New Zealand anywhere you sort of go in the world. So I'm not as scary as Nonu or Savir or someone like that doing it, but I normally revert to that. It's a little bit easier and gets a nice round of applause at the end.
Brilliant. Yep. Excellent. All right. And like I said, all these can cover any play that you played with. Who had the best dress sense and who had the worst dress sense?
Oh, I think I'm going to try and stick to Newcastle. I think Ruben Zankovic always dressed quite well. I think living in Newcastle, that sort of beachy lifestyle suited him and what he wore. Worst dress, I'll probably go Michael Bridges. Like that guy just. Yep. How long did he play in the Premier League for? And he still turns up in track pants and his shoes on the wrong feet.
You would be surprised how many times Bridgie was mentioned when we ask these questions to former players. Who had the best taste in music and who had the worst?
Let's say I'm gonna stitch Lubo up for this. His taste of music I don't like, so I'm gonna say his was horrible. But he always took control of the music when we're out on a night out, so I sort of had to deal with it. And me and Taylor Regan spent a lot of time together, so we're probably always sharing the same music and beats in the car.
Was there a story about Lubo DJing after the LA Galaxy? Was it the LA Galaxy?
Yeah, he was. Yeah, he was in charge. So, like I said, when you've got a couple of drinks in you, it's probably all right. But when you first turn up and he's on the DJ, those first couple of drinks go quickly.
Who drove the best car and who drove a clanker?
Oh, Taylor Regan didn't have a good car. Ditch him up again. And best car, I'm trying to think. I think Sasha Petrovsky might have had I'm not sure what he had, but I think I remember him turning up in quite a nice car. Yep. So we'll go with Sasha.
Sure. All right. Who spent the most time in front of the mirror? Which it wouldn't have been Ruben.
No, it definitely wasn't Ruben. He was easy. Just
yeah.
Easy. Who else is there? Topper Stanley had to get his locks into action quite a lot of times. So let me stitch Topper up there.
All right. I didn't think it took that long to put an Alice band on, but we'll go with that. No worries. Best player you ever played with?
I'm gonna say. Let me have one in Newcastle and then one that I've.
Yeah.
I think at Newcastle, I'm gonna say Casey Wehrman. Just the way he dominated the game and controlled the game when we were on top of games. And then best player I've played with outside. I'm gonna say there's a guy that I play with or played with at Super Sports. He was my strike partner, Bradley Krobler. We just had a really good relationship together, scored a lot of goals and won a lot of trophies together. So,
Yep, fantastic. And who was the best player you ever played against?
oh, okay. I'm going to go back to a nightmare game for not only for me but for New Zealand as well. We're playing Spain in the 2009 Confederations Cup, and I was playing right wing back at the time, and I had David Silva and Joan Capdevila bombing on the outside of David Silva, and I just didn't know what was going on. And I think from memory, Fernando Torres had a hat trick after about 7 or 8 minutes. So yeah, that's a game that sticks out in the memories as a nightmare.
Yeah, absolutely. Best joker or prankster you were ever in a playing group with? Who was good for a prank?
There's a guy in South Africa. His name's Tuso Pala. So he was sort of like the clown of the change room, the joker, and much loved by everyone, not only in the change room but all the fans as well. He had a nice little dance routine that he would always be given for the fans after the games. And he probably sticks out as someone that you always want in your change room for a good laugh and to be careful of.
Who was the player you always hated to face in the A-League?
Ooh. I'm gonna. Yeah, this is a tough one, I think.
You hated seeing his name on the team sheet.
Yeah, there's got to be someone. Oh, who I always had a tough battle against was Matt Smith of Brisbane Roar. It was obviously in those times that they were dominating, and I had a brief spell with him at the Fury, so I know what he's like as a trainer, as a competitor, and he was always someone that I had a tough time coming up against.
And final question to round it out and to round out the interview. If you never became a footballer, what do you think you would have been instead?
Oh, that's a good question, and one that I still get now.
Yeah.
And then piled on top of that, my wife always says, "What are you going to do after you finish playing?" So, I guess if I didn't become a footballer, then my dad has a building and insulation business that I probably would have had to try and tag along and do that. But now, as I'm sort of getting close to the end of my career, I have a lot of joy in coaching young kids. I like to give back to the kids and try and inspire the sort of next generation coming through. So if I can be involved with football and kids development at some stage, along with maybe owning a coffee shop on Newcastle Beach, then that'll be quite a nice little lifestyle I have myself.
Well, I know you'd have quite a few people lined up outside to get the early morning cappuccino from you. So that will be fantastic, mate. Jeremy, really appreciate your time today. Thank you for yesterday as well, for the little bit of a hiccup we had getting it all going. But mate, you've been fantastic with your answers and your time. We really appreciate it, and we hope we see you again in Newcastle very soon. Love to the wife and kids, and like we said, say good day to Gareth for us, and we hope Rixon's doing well. So mate, really appreciate your time today.
Yeah, cool. Cheers. Thanks for giving me the opportunity, and good luck to you and the team for the rest of the season.